I remember the sound before I remember the pain. It was a low thud, the kind that travels through the floorboards before it reaches your ears, the vibration of something heavy shifting in a house that used to feel safe. It was the evening after my father's funeral, and the air inside our home felt wrong too, still too cold, as if grief had hollowed out every corner and left only echoes behind. I stood near the doorway of the living room, still wearing the black dress from the service, still smelling the faint traces of flowers from the cemetery. My father's urn sat wrapped in a cloth inside my bag because I could not bear to leave him anywhere except near me. I remember thinking that if I stayed very quiet, maybe the house would settle. Maybe Logan would leave me alone long enough for me to breathe. But silence, I learned that night, does not calm a person who is already drowning. Logan had been drinking since the moment we returned from the cemetery. I smelled the alcohol before he stepped into view, the sharp bite of whiskey mixing with the stale scent of grief that clung to the house. When he appeared in the doorway, his shirt was wrinkled, his tie hanging loose, and his eyes red in a way that came from more than mourning. He looked at me with something I could not recognize at first. Not sadness, not grief, but suspicion, like I had committed a crime I did not know existed. "What were you doing in Dad's study earlier?" His voice came out thick and uneven. "You think I did not see you?" I swallowed, caught off guard. I had gone into the study only because my father's sweater was still draped over his chair, and for a moment, I wanted to feel close to him again. I opened my mouth to tell Logan that, but the words got stuck in the air between us. Logan stepped closer. "You were reading something. You were going through his things. What did you find?" I shook my head. "Nothing. I was just picking up a few things." Logan let out a harsh laugh. It was sharp and cracked nothing like the brother I grew up with. "You always thought you were special, Emily. You think Dad trusted you more than me. You think whatever he left behind belongs to you." I felt the first sting of fear tighten in my chest. Logan moved toward me with the slow, deliberate steps of someone whose anger had finally decided where to land. Before I could step back, his hand shot out and wrapped around my wrist. His grip was so hard, I gasped. "Let go," I tried to say, but the words came out small and shaky. "You found something," he snarled. "I know you did. That letter, the letter he wrote before he died. You were trying to take it." My heart dropped. The sealed envelope, the one my father had pressed into my hand a week before he passed, the one I had not opened, the one I had kept hidden. How did Logan even know it existed? I tried to pull my wrist free, but his fingers dug deeper into my skin. The room tilted as he yanked me forward. My shoulder slammed into the banister behind me, and a burst of white flashed across my vision. For a moment, sound disappeared. When it returned, it was only Logan's breathing, rough and uneven. "Dad is gone," he growled. "And without him, you think you can take everything. You think you can take this house. You think you can take what is mine." His face was inches from mine. I could smell the alcohol on his breath. I tried again to speak to calm him, to remind him we had just buried the only parent we had left, but grief had twisted itself into something hostile inside him. He dragged me toward the front hallway. My heartbeat pounded so loudly it filled my ears. "Logan, stop. Please. We can talk in the morning. We are both grieving." He ignored me. With one violent motion, he flung open the front door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the bite of early winter. The porch light flickered, casting an uneven glow on the steps outside. I felt the shift in him the moment before it happened. That small tightenings of his shoulders, that last inhale before the cruelty lands. "Get out," he said. His voice dropped into something empty, something chilling. "Dad is gone, and so are you." Then he shoved me. My foot slipped on the edge of the top step. I reached for the railing, but my fingers barely brushed it before I fell. The world flipped. The porch rose up too fast. Pain shot through my hip as I hit the wooden boards. The bag with my father's ashes thudded against my side but stayed zipped. I lay there for a moment stunned. My breath caught somewhere between my ribs. When I forced myself to look up, Logan stood in the doorway, his silhouette carved sharply against the warm light behind him, For half a second, I thought I saw a flicker of hesitation, maybe even regret, but whatever softness had been there vanished. "This family does not need you," he said. Then he stepped back inside, and the door slammed shut with a force that made the porch shake. The sound echoed down the street and through my bones. I stayed frozen on the cold wood, the night pressing against my skin, my father's ashes clutched against my chest. Grief and shock spun together until I could not tell where one ended and the other began. In a single night, I had buried my father. In the next, my brother had buried whatever remained of the life I thought I still had. And as the cold crept through my clothes, a truth settled inside me, with a weight I had never felt before. No one was coming to open that door again. Not for me. Not ever. The night after Logan shoved me out of the house kept replaying in my mind as I sat on the curb across from our home, my father's urn held tightly against my chest. I stayed there for hours, numb and shivering, waiting for something to change. A light turning on, a door unlocking, a moment of remorse. None of it happened. Dawn began to bleed into the sky, pale and indifferent, when I finally stood and wiped my face. My cheeks were cold with dried tears. My body felt heavy, as if every bone inside me was lined with grief. I told myself I would try one last time. Not to go back, but to gather what little I had left inside the house. My clothes. My school bag. Maybe a few things of my father's that Logan had not yet touched. When I knocked on the door, there was no answer. The windows were dark. Logan's truck was still in the driveway, so he had not gone anywhere. Hesitation rooted my feet to the porch. I remembered how quickly his anger had ignited, but I also remembered my father's voice from a week before he died, soft and strained as he sat on the edge of his bed. He had pressed a sealed envelope into my hand and said my name the way he always did when he wanted me to really listen. "Emily, whatever happens, keep this safe. It is for you. You will understand when the time is right." I had tucked it inside my backpack, intending to read it after the funeral. Then grief swallowed all my thoughts, and Logan's fury drove me from the house before I had the chance. I needed that letter. Something told me it mattered more than I realized. I reached for the doorknob. It turned. Logan had not locked it yet. I slipped inside, letting the quiet press against me. The house smelled faintly of stale beer and the roses from the funeral arrangements. My father's framed photograph still sat on the mantel, watching over a living room that no longer felt like home. I took a cautious step, listening for movement. Nothing. The silence was unsettling. I walked down the hallway toward my bedroom. My backpack lay on the floor where it had landed the night before when Logan shoved me out. I knelt, picking it up, unzipping the front pocket with trembling fingers. The letter was still there. Relief flooded me in one sharp breath. But something else was in the bag, too. A shadow in the hallway. Logan stood leaning against the wall, his arms crossed, his face hard and unreadable. For a second, I thought he might apologize. A ridiculous hope, but grief makes fools of all of us. Instead, he pushed off the wall and walked toward me. "You came back." His voice was flat. I rose slowly, clutching the envelope. "I just came for my things." Logan's gaze dropped to my hand. His expression twisted, suspicion flaring once again. "What is that?" I stepped back. "It is nothing, just something Dad gave me." Before I could explain, his hand shot out. Faster than I could react, he snatched the envelope from my fingers. "Logan, stop. Give it back." He stared at the handwriting for one long, tense moment. Then his jaw clenched. "You think Dad left something for you that he did not tell me about? You think he trusted you more?" I took a shaky breath. "It is not about trust. He gave it to me because he wanted me to have it. Please, just let me read it." Logan tore the envelope in half. The sound sliced through me like a physical blow. The paper ripped again and again as he pulled the letter apart, tearing through the neat handwriting our father had written with shaking hands. White scraps fluttered to the floor, some drifting onto my shoes, others catching the air and scattering across the hallway. I fell to my knees, trying to gather the pieces, my fingers trembling too hard to hold them. Logan watched me with a cold, triumphant stare. "There is no your future, Emily. Everything in this house belongs to me now. Dad is gone. You are not taking anything from me. You are not taking what is mine. My throat tightened until I could barely breathe. The torn pieces of paper blurred through my tears. I could only make out fragments of words, none of them enough to understand what my father had wanted me to know. Logan stepped toward the front door, grabbed a set of keys from the hook, and shoved a new one into the lock. I heard the metallic click of him changing it. He looked back at me, standing over the scattered pieces of my father's final message. Get out, and do not come back. This house is mine. My grief was still raw, still pulsing in my chest, but something inside me shifted, the kind of shift that comes not from anger, but from clarity. I gathered as many scraps as I could, folding them into my palm, as gently as if they were the last breaths of someone I loved. I stood and held his stare. Dad would never have wanted this. Logan scoffed. Dad is dead, and what he wanted does not matter anymore. He opened the door and gestured outward. You want to hold on to a fantasy. Fine, but you are not doing it here. I stepped outside. Logan slammed the door behind me. The deadbolt clicked. My father's torn words pressed against my palm, sharp and thin. Pieces that might never fit back together. The sky was bright now, sunlight streaking across the neighborhood as if nothing extraordinary had happened. As if I had not just watched the last thing my father ever wrote for me be reduced to scraps. But as I walked down the street, clutching the fragments, the shock slowly melted into something else. Not hope, exactly. Not yet. But a question. If my father gave me this letter knowing Logan might try to destroy it, then what else had he prepared for? And was this really the end of what he wanted me to find, or only the beginning? The cold morning air stung my face as I walked away from the house that had stopped being mine long before Logan changed the lock. The torn scraps of my father's letter were tucked inside my coat pocket, fragile as dried leaves. Every step felt unsteady, the world tilting beneath me as if grief had loosened the ground itself. I kept waiting for the shock to crack open into tears, but nothing came. It was a numbness that sat in my chest like a stone. I reached the end of the street and turned back for one last look. The curtains in the living room shifted. Logan stood behind them, watching me, his silhouette still and sharp. When he realized I had seen him, he let the curtain fall. That was the moment I understood fully. He did not just want me gone. He wanted me erased. I walked until the streets blurred together, until my legs felt hollow and my breath came in thin, shaky strands. I told myself to think of a plan of somewhere I could go, but my mind floated like a loose tether. There was no family nearby, no friends I could call without their parents asking questions. I was 18, legally an adult, legally able to sleep on the street without triggering any social services intervention. The law did not care whether I had bruises under my sleeves or an older brother who shoved me out of my home the night we buried our father. People imagine that turning 18 brings freedom. Sometimes it simply removes the safety net. I reached the bus station just outside town, a small concrete building with metal benches that always smelled faintly of gasoline. I sat on the far end, drawing my knees up, pulling my coat tighter around me. A man in a faded baseball cap glanced at me, then looked away. No one asked if I was all right. In America, people look past what they cannot fix. My stomach growled, but I ignored it. Hunger was easier than fear. I took out the scraps of the torn letter and tried to piece them together on my lap. A corner with my name, a line that read, "Future is." Another piece with the partial word, "trust." The rest was too damaged to decipher. I stared at the fragments until they blurred. Why did my father not tell me directly? Why give me something so important that it could be destroyed in seconds? The question circled my thoughts until it tangled with everything else. My father's gray face in the hospital, his trembling hands as he gave me the envelope, Logan's bitterness, his debt, his drinking, all of it twisted into a single truth. My father had known something I did not. The weight of that thought pressed against my ribs. A bus rolled in, the engine rumbling loudly. People stood gathered, their belongings moved with purpose. I had nowhere to move toward. When the benches emptied again, I lay down, curling my coat beneath my head. The metal was unforgiving, but exhaustion dragged at my limbs. I tried to sleep, but every time my eyes closed, I felt the porch beneath me, heard the slam of the door, felt Logan's hand on my arm. At one point, a security guard walked by. He paused, studying me. "You waiting for someone?" I swallowed. "No, just resting." His expression shifted. He knew. People always do. But instead of telling me to leave, he nodded once and kept walking. That small act of mercy nearly broke me. Hours passed. Cars hissed by on the highway. A siren wailed somewhere in the distance. The numbness began to crack, and fear slid in through the seams. Not fear of Logan. Fear of disappearing. Fear of being forgotten. I reached for my father's ring, the one he had worn every day for as long as I could remember. He had given it to me the night before he was hospitalized, placing it in my palm with a tired smile. "You will need strength, Emmy." And sometimes strength is remembering who you are. The metal felt cold and reassuring in my hand. I slipped it onto my finger. It was slightly loose, but it stayed. I breathed deeply and stood again. I had to find help, even if help came in small pieces. I walked to the neighborhood where my Aunt Louise lived, hoping she might at least let me charge my phone or make a call. When I knocked, the porch light flicked on. She opened the door a few inches. Her hair was tied back, her glasses perched low. "Emily, I did not expect to see you." Her gaze drifted to my bag, my wrinkled coat, my tired face. I tried to smile. "I just need to make a call, and maybe rest for a moment, just until I figure out what to do." Her expression tightened. "I have spoken to your brother. He told me you have been acting out, that you left on your own and things got heated." I stared at her, stunned. Acting out. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. "Grief affects us all differently. Logan is going through so much. Losing your father was hardest on him. You should not try to make excuses for upsetting him further." A flatness spread in my chest. People always protect the person they believe has suffered more. They rarely look at the person standing quietly in the doorway. I tried to say that Logan had shoved me out, that he had torn my father's letter, that I had nowhere to go. But each time I spoke, Aunt Louise shook her head slightly, dismissing me before the words even landed. "You need to give him space," she said. "He is grieving." Her voice softened, trying to offer comfort that spilled in the wrong direction. "Go sort things out with your brother. You are family." The porch light flicked off. The door closed. I stood there in the dark for a long time, feeling the cold settle deeper into my bones. That was the moment I understood that no one was coming to help. Not family, not neighbors, not the world that kept turning while mine unraveled. I walked down the street, my footsteps echoing on the pavement. The sky was growing darker. My breath fogged in front of me. I wrapped my coat tighter, tucked my father's torn letter closer to my heart, and whispered to myself the only truth that felt solid. If I was going to survive this, I would have to find a way on my own. The void swallowed the road ahead, but I stepped into it anyway, because moving forward even blindly was the only choice I had left. Night settled over the town in a slow, heavy way as I walked with no destination, just moving because stopping would mean admitting how truly alone I was. Streetlights flickered overhead, casting pale circles of light that felt more like spotlights on my failure than any kind of comfort. My breath hung in the air, a thin white cloud that dissolved faster than my thoughts could form. I passed houses with warm windows, laughter drifting from behind curtains, the smell of dinner lingering in the cold. Lives continuing, families intact, doors that would open if someone knocked. For the first time in my life, I realized that home was not a place I could go back to. It was something I had lost, and I did not know if I would ever find another version of it. By the time I reached the edge of town, my legs were trembling from exhaustion. A neon sign buzzed above a small roadside diner called Mary's Stop, the kind of place where truckers refilled their coffee before long drives and retirees met at booths to discuss weather patterns and grocery discounts. It glowed like a beacon in the darkness. I pushed the door open and a warm wave of air wrapped around me. The smell of frying eggs, old coffee, and something sugary filled my nose. It was almost enough to make me cry. Inside, a handful of customers sat hunched over plates, their faces lit by fluorescent bulbs. I hesitated near the entrance, unsure whether I even belonged here. My coat was wrinkled, my shoes scuffed my face, drawn with a kind of tiredness I had never experienced. A woman behind the counter noticed me. She looked to be in her late 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled into a bun, soft eyes, and the kind of expression that could tell when someone was trying not to fall apart. "You need anything, honey?" Her voice carried the gentleness of someone who had spoken to weathered souls before. I swallowed hard. "I am sorry. I do not have money for food. I just need a place to sit for a moment. I can leave if you want." She studied me for a long second, her gaze dropping to my hands. She must have seen the faint bruising forming on my wrist, the stiffness in my posture, the exhaustion etched into every line of my face. "What is your name?" "Emily." "Well, Emily, I am Mary. And you look like you have been standing in a storm for far too long." She lifted a coffee pot. "Sit. First cup is on the house." I blinked, stunned by the simple kindness. I slid into a booth near the back, the vinyl seat cold against my legs. When Mary set the mug in front of me, my hands shook as I wrapped them around the warm ceramic. "Thank you," I whispered. She gave me a small nod and went back to the counter. I stared at the swirling steam rising from the mug, feeling it thaw something inside me. But warmth only goes so far when the reality of your situation creeps in. I had nowhere to sleep, no money, no one to call. The certainty settled over me like a heavy blanket. When the diner emptied out to just 2 customers left, Mary approached my booth again. "You eaten today?" I shook my head. She sighed softly as if she had already guessed. "Wait here." She returned with a plate of scrambled eggs and toast. "This is on me. Eat." I wanted to refuse to keep some scrap of dignity, but hunger had hollowed me out. I picked up a piece of toast and took a bite. The simple warmth of it nearly made me tear up. After a moment, Mary slid into the seat across from me. "You look too young to be wandering around at this hour. Trouble at home." The kind of question that hits harder because the person asking can already see the truth. I hesitated. Anything I said would sound unbelievable. But something in Mary's eyes told me she was not the kind of person who turned away from someone who needed help. "My father passed away. Yesterday. And my brother." I paused, trying to find words that did not sound like betrayal or pity. "He made me leave." Mary's face softened. "That is a lot for one girl to carry by herself. You have somewhere to go tonight." I shook my head. She tapped her fingers on the table, thinking. "When I first opened this place," she began, "I was working nights and mornings and barely slept. I used the utility room in the back to lie down between shifts. It has a cot. It is not much, but it is warm. And it is safe." My breath caught. "Are you saying I can stay there?" "For now, until you figure something out. But I will not have you sleeping out in the cold." "Not tonight." Relief washed over me so quickly it left me lightheaded. She glanced at my mug. "And if you want some work, I always need help with dishes and wiping tables. Pay is small, but it is honest." I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "Thank you. Truly." She smiled gently. "Everyone needs a lifeline at some point. You are allowed to take one." After the diner closed at midnight, Mary led me through a narrow hallway behind the kitchen. The scent of grease and old wood grew stronger. She opened a door to a small utility room. There was a cot against the wall, a stack of folded blankets, and a space heater humming softly. It was not a home, but it was shelter. It was mercy. It was the first moment since the funeral that I did not feel like I was disappearing. I sat on the cot, pulling the blanket over my shoulders. My father's torn letter rested inside my coat pocket. I thought of him, his voice, his hands, his promise that I would understand when the time was right. As the heater hummed and the wind rattled the metal siding outside, I whispered a quiet vow to myself. I would not let this be the end of me. I would build something from the pieces left in my hands. Even if I had to start in the dark with nothing but a cot in a diner and the memory of my father. The first morning I woke up in the diner's utility room, the air smelled faintly of dish soap and leftover onions, and the hum of the old space heater filled the silence like a heartbeat. For a moment, before my eyes fully opened, I let myself pretend I was back home in my bedroom, with my father humming off key in the kitchen warming his hands around a mug of coffee. But reality returned quickly sharp and cold. The cot beneath me, The ache in my body from sleeping curled up in fear the night before, the bruises blooming under my sleeves, the scraps of my father's torn letter tucked safely inside my coat, and the knowledge that I had no home except this borrowed room. Mary greeted me with a warm nod when I stepped out into the diner's main room. "Morning rush is coming. You up for helping?" I nodded. A simple gesture, but for the first time in days, it felt like I was choosing something rather than surviving something. She handed me a rag. "Start with the tables." The work was not hard, but it was steady grounding rhythmic. Wipe the tables, collect dishes, restock napkins. It kept my thoughts from spiraling into places where grief lived unchecked. And every time a customer walked in, shook off the cold, and took a seat, I felt a little less invisible. Later that morning, as I wiped the counter, the old man who had been eating alone in the corner booth approached me. He wore a thick brown jacket that smelled faintly of tobacco and winter air. "You are new here." His voice was gravelly but kind. I nodded. He studied me with the quiet perception of someone who had lived long enough to recognize pain without being told its story. "Be kind to yourself, kid. Bruises fade, but character that stays." He slid $1 under his empty mug and walked out. His words echoed in my mind long after he left. At the end of my shift, Mary joined me at the counter. The rush had slowed, and the diner hummed with the soft clatter of dishes drying in the back. She set a cup of tea in front of me. "You do good work, Emily. If you want to keep the job, it's yours." My chest tightened with gratitude. I would like that. But as I stared into the tea, the bitter truth settled in. A job was a start, but it was not enough. I needed money. Real money. Enough to keep me alive, to buy a phone plan, to eventually find a place to live. I could not sleep in the utility room forever. That afternoon, while sweeping the back hallway, I noticed something. An old radio mounted high on the wall. The wiring behind it was loose, the cord frayed. Out of instinct, without thinking, I reached up and adjusted it, twisting the wire until the static crackled back into music. It was a small thing, but my hands remembered the movement. My father had taught me how to fix things when I was little. Radios, old lamps, broken cabinet hinges, loose outlets. He used to say fixing something was like understanding a person. You start by not being afraid of what is broken. I stood there staring at the radio, and a thought flickered to life. That same evening, as Mary locked the front door, I stepped outside and looked up at the row of small houses across the street. Porches sagging, gutters drooping, porch lights flickering. All things my father would have fixed without a second thought. I swallowed hard. Maybe I could do more than wipe tables. Maybe I could use what he taught me. The next morning I asked Mary if she knew anyone who needed small repair work done. She raised an eyebrow. "What can you fix?" "A lot," I said softly. She sent me to Mrs. Whitaker, an older woman who lived 3 blocks away. Her porch light had been flickering for weeks, and her heater made a rattling sound that kept her up at night. When I knocked on her door, she looked me over with curious suspicion. "You are the girl from Mary's diner." I nodded. "Heard you needed help." She led me inside. The house smelled like lavender detergent and old carpet. I inspected the heater first. Dust built up in the fan, a loose screw. 10 minutes later, the rattling stopped. Then the porch light. Faulty wiring in the socket. Another 10 minutes and it glowed steadily. Mrs. Whitaker's eyebrows lifted. "How much do I owe you?" I hesitated. I had never priced anything before. "Whatever you think is fair." She handed me $20. It felt like a fortune. Word traveled faster than I expected. By the end of the week, I had repaired a wobbly mailbox post, a dripping faucet, 2 lamps, and a malfunctioning thermostat. The money was not much, but it was steady. And more importantly, it reminded me I was not powerless. Every time I fixed something, I felt a small part of myself anchoring again. Pain turned into purpose. Fear turned into skill. Silence turned into documentation. Because even as I built small stability with my hands, another lesson from my father resurfaced. When you have no protection, you protect yourself with truth. So I wrote everything down, the exact time Logan forced me out, the bruises I found on my arms, the fragments of my father's letter. Logan's words, his drinking, his accusations, his threats. I saved screenshots of messages he sent. I backed them up on a cheap flash drive I bought with the repair money. Not because I knew what would come next, but because some part of me sensed the truth. When someone wants you gone, you do not leave gaps in your story. You leave a record. I did not understand then how important that habit would become, but I felt stronger each time I added to the growing file. As winter crept closer, the nights grew colder, and the diner's utility room felt smaller, but the flicker inside me grew into something steady. Not hope, exactly. Something sharper. Determination. I would not let what happened define me. I would not let Logan's violence become the end of my story. I would use everything my father taught me, every skill, every instinct, every memory, even my pain. One night, after finishing a repair job for an elderly couple, I stood outside their house with $25 in my pocket. The sky was a dark, endless blue. My breath fogged in the air, and for the first time since the funeral, I felt something that resembled possibility. Not safety, not comfort, but the faint hint of a path forming beneath my feet, a beginning carved from what was left. Just when my life began to settle into something that resembled rhythm, the kind of rhythm that comes from working long shifts, doing small repair jobs, and sleeping on a cot that hummed with the sound of an old space heater, the sabotage started. It arrived quietly at first, like a faint crack in a foundation no one notices until the whole structure begins to tilt. I was wiping down the counter at the diner when Mary approached me with a frown that did not match her usual calm expression. "Your aunt called here," she said. Sounded concerned. I stiffened. "Which aunt?" "Louise. She said she has been trying to reach you and that you have been ignoring family." The rag froze in my hand. Family. I almost laughed. I asked what she wanted. Mary gave me a sad look. "She said she heard you were having trouble, that Logan told everyone you have been spiraling since your father died, that you left by choice, and that you have been telling lies." My stomach dropped. Lies. Spiraling. The words tasted like poison. He was rewriting the story. Of course he was. In every abusive situation, the more powerful person always rushes to control the narrative first. I took a slow breath. Did she say anything else? Mary hesitated. "She said she thinks you took something important from the house. Something of your father's." The floor beneath me felt unsteady for a moment, like my knees had forgotten their purpose. The torn letter, the envelope Logan destroyed. He was trying to cover it up by painting me as the unstable one. He wanted the world to believe I had run off with something that belonged to him. I forced myself to finish wiping the counter, but inside my chest, something twisted, a mix of anger and dread that made it hard to breathe. Over the next few days, the sabotage grew sharper. A woman I had repaired a thermostat for stepped inside the diner one afternoon. She approached me with a hesitant expression. "Emily, sweetheart." "I just want to ask something." My heart tightened. "Sure." She lowered her voice. "Your brother said you might not be, well, that you have been making up stories, that the two of you had a normal disagreement and you blew it out of proportion." I almost dropped the plate in my hand. Of all the ways Logan could hurt me, this was the one he knew would cut deepest. Not physical violence, not yelling, not shoving. It was the slow erosion of my credibility. The kind that makes people tilt their heads and wonder whether the bruises on your arms came from a fall or something else. The kind that isolates you more effectively than any locked door. I forced a tight smile. "Thank you for asking, but I am fine." "Truly." She gave me a doubtful nod and left with her order. After she walked out, the air in the diner felt too thick to breathe. I stepped into the back hallway and leaned against the wall, letting my head fall back. The truth settled inside me like a cold weight. He was poisoning the well, and soon no one would believe anything I said. That night, as I walked back from a small repair job 3 blocks away, my phone buzzed with a number I did not recognize. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. Before I could speak, a voice slithered through the speaker. "You think you are clever, Emily." My blood ran cold. "Logan, you think you can run around town pretending to be some saint while telling stories about me." "What are you talking about?" I kept walking, quickening my pace as the wind stung my cheeks. You should have stayed gone." His voice grew louder. "But you want to keep pressing buttons. You want to keep making me look like the villain." I swallowed. "I have not said anything about you. I just want to live my life." He laughed, but there was nothing human in the sound. "Too late for that. People are already starting to talk, and trust me, I will make sure they hear the right version." My hands trembled as I held the phone. "Logan, please. Dad would not want this. You are angry. You are grieving. Let us both take space and just stop hurting each other." The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. Then his voice dropped into a tone so cold it felt like a finger running down my spine. "Come near this house again and I will finish what I started." The call ended. I stopped walking, the breath knocked out of me. The street was empty quiet except for the occasional passing car. A dog barked in the distance, but everything around me felt too still, as if the night itself had paused to listen. I forced myself to move, to breathe, to focus on the rhythm of my footsteps until my heart slowed. When I reached the diner, Mary took one look at my pale face and furrowed her brow. "Are you all right?" I nodded, but the lie felt weak. I excused myself to the utility room and shut the door behind me. I slid down until I sat on the cold floor, pulling my knees to my chest. The rage that simmered inside me was unlike anything I had felt before. Not wild rage, not frantic rage, but a low, steady burn, the kind that brings clarity. Logan thought he could push me out of our home, steal my father's final words, shatter my stability, and then rewrite the truth itself. He thought I would fold under pressure, too exhausted or too afraid to stand up for myself. I reached for the binder I had started assembling, the one filled with notes. Dates, screenshots, pictures of bruises, torn pieces of the letter, and everything else I had documented in the past weeks. I flipped it open, added the time of his call, his exact words, and the way my body had reacted. Trembling, shortness of breath, fear. I wrote all of it down. My father once told me that truth without proof is just noise, but truth with documentation is a weapon. As I set my pen down, something inside me settled. A cold, unwavering resolve. Logan wanted a war of narratives, a war of perception, a war of fear. Fine. I would not fight him with fists or rage or reckless confrontation. I would fight him the way my father taught me to survive, with evidence, with patience, and with the quiet conviction of someone who refuses to vanish. The sabotage had begun, but so had my preparation. The morning after Logan's threatening call, I woke before the sun, my mind tangled with fragments of fear and determination. The utility room felt colder than usual, as if the space heater's warmth could no longer keep out the chill that had settled in my bones. I sat on the cot for a long moment, staring at the binder that lay open beside me. The notes, the screenshots, the times and dates, the torn edges of my father's letter. Proof of a story no one believed yet. Proof I was afraid might never be enough. I had just begun pulling my hair into a loose ponytail when Mary knocked gently on the door. "Breakfast rush is lighter today. If you want a break, now's the time." Her voice held an unspoken invitation. "You look like you need to breathe, kid." I nodded grateful and stepped into the diner. A few customers sipped coffee at the far booths. The air smelled of butter and cinnamon, and for a moment I let the familiar scents steady me. After finishing a set of repairs in the back room, I grabbed the broom from the corner to sweep behind the shelves, a spot Mary never had time to reach. Dust clung to everything. Cables, cardboard boxes, old cleaning supplies. As I swept, something metallic clinked against the floor. I crouched down, brushing aside the dust, and saw a small key lying near a box of outdated menus. It was thin, brass-colored, with a number engraved on the top. My breath hitched. I knew that shape. When I was 12, my father took me to the bank and opened a safety deposit box for his important documents. He told me adults kept their most irreplaceable things in places like that. A will, a deed, a letter that mattered enough to protect. My heart pounded. This key could not be Mary's. She did not strike me as the type to keep valuables in a diner, and it could not be something Logan dropped here. He had never set foot inside the diner before the night he stormed in yelling and accusing me of stealing from him, which left only one possibility. The key was mine. or rather, it had belonged to my father. But how would it end up in a stack of old menus? Then a memory cracked open. The night I first arrived, shivering and bruised, Mary had taken my coat and bag to the back while I warmed up with coffee. She had told me she tucked my things safely away before the rush began. The key might have fallen out then. My hands trembled as I lifted it, feeling its weight settle into my palm. The engraved numbers matched the faint recollection from that day at the bank. "Dad, what did you leave for me?" After my shift, I walked to the bank, the cold wind biting at my cheeks. The building stood solid and unmovable, its glass doors reflecting the gray morning sky. Inside, the warmth felt clinical distant, nothing like the diner's gentle chaos. I approached the counter. "I need access to a safety deposit box." I showed the clerk the key. She typed something into her computer, her expression polite but neutral. "Box number 93. Name on file. Thomas Warren, my father." My chest tightened. She asked for identification, and when I handed her my ID, she nodded. "You are listed as an authorized secondary." My father had added my name. He had prepared for this. She led me down a quiet hallway lined with reinforced doors, the kind that smelled faintly of metal and time. When she unlocked the box and placed it on the small table in the viewing room, she left me alone. My hands hovered above the lid. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply. Opening it felt like stepping into the moment before a truth reveals itself. A moment when the world could still turn out to be gentle. I opened the box. Inside lay a small stack of documents wrapped in a rubber band, a velvet pouch, and an envelope. The envelope, untorn, whole. My father's handwriting stretched across the front, steady and familiar, even in death. "Emily, for when you need it." A tight sound escaped my throat, a sound between a sob and a breath. I reached for the envelope, my fingers trembling. Before opening it, I sat back, grounding myself. I wanted to feel my father here, the weight of his hope, the intentionality behind every decision he made in his final weeks. Then I gently slid the letter from the envelope. "Emily, if you are reading this, then things have unfolded exactly the way I feared. Your brother loves you, but he is not well. His debts, his anger, the people he owes, they have changed him in ways he cannot admit. I tried to help him. I tried to guide him, but you cannot save someone who refuses to save himself. You must protect yourself now, and you must not face him alone." I swallowed hard, blinking through the sting in my eyes. My hands tightened around the pages. "I am leaving the estate to you. All of it. The house, the land, the accounts. Logan will inherit only if he honors the conditions. He must allow you to remain in the home. He must treat you without violence. He must seek help for his drinking. If he fails, the estate automatically reverts to you alone. I have filed this update with my attorney. A notarized copy rests in this box." My breath caught. The truth reverberated through me like a shockwave. My father had known. He had seen the darkness forming in Logan long before I had, and he had tried to shield me even from beyond the grave. There was one final paragraph. "Emily, do not confront your brother. Do not try to reason with him when he is drinking or frightened. Go to the attorney. Show him this letter. Let the law protect you where I no longer can. I love you, my girl, more than my failing hands could express. Live a life that is yours, not shaped by guilt, not shaped by fear. Yours." I pressed the letter to my chest, letting silent tears fall. In that small room, surrounded by steel walls and fluorescent lighting, I felt my father with me, not gone, not silent, guiding me still. The velvet pouch held a copy of the will, notarized just as my father said. The legal language felt cold, detached, but every line carried the warmth of his intention. Everything shifted in that moment. The past weeks, the bruises, the threats, the torn scraps. None of it was the end. It was only the beginning of the truth he had wanted me to find. As I closed the box and walked out of the bank, the winter air bit at my cheeks again, but I did not feel the cold this time. I felt movement, direction, power wrapped in grief. My father had given me more than a letter. He had given me a weapon. When I stepped out of the bank, the sky was a muted slate gray, low clouds stretching across the horizon like a warning. I held my father's letter and the notarized documents pressed against my chest inside my coat, as though the thin fabric could guard them from the world. My breath fogged the air as I walked each inhale sharp enough to sting. The weight of what I had discovered did not crush me. It steadied me. It anchored me. It felt like the first solid truth I had stood on since the night Logan threw me out. I needed to get to the attorney. The letter made that clear. My father had written those instructions while fully aware of Logan's volatility. He must have known something would ignite after his death. The attorney's office was on the other side of town, a 20-minute walk in the cold. My fingers ached by the time I reached the brick building with its small wooden sign that read David Kessler Probate and Family Law. The name tugged at a distant memory. I had met him once when I was a child. My father had brought me along for an appointment, letting me spin in one of the lobby chairs while he signed documents. He had always said Kessler was a good man, a straight line in a crooked world. I pushed open the door. The lobby was quiet, warm, and smelled faintly of lemon polish. A receptionist looked up from her computer. "Can I help you?" I swallowed. "I need to speak to Mr. Kessler. It is about my father. His name was Thomas Warren." The receptionist's expression softened immediately. "Oh, sweetheart, I am sorry for your loss. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but he left something for me. Something important." She studied me for a moment, then picked up the phone. After a brief conversation, she nodded. "He will see you. Through that door." I stepped into the office. David Kessler sat behind a large oak desk, his glasses perched low on his nose. His hair had grayed since I last saw him, but his eyes were the same sharp, steady blue I remembered. "Emily Warren," he said, rising to shake my hand. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances. Sit down. Tell me what brings you here." The words caught in my throat for a moment, tangled with grief and fear and something new. Resolve. I reached into my coat and placed the father's letter on his desk, followed by the notarized will update. His eyebrows lifted. He examined the documents slowly, thoroughly, as if each line carried weight. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Your father tried to prepare for this." His voice was calm, gentle, but firm. "He updated his will, placed the notarized copy in the deposit box, and named you as primary beneficiary. Your brother receives nothing unless he meets the behavioral conditions." My grip tightened on the arms of my chair. I knew what the letter said, but hearing it spoken aloud made the truth feel more real. Kessler continued, "Based on the language here, if Logan engaged in any violent or threatening behavior toward you, he automatically forfeits his claim." "Did your brother harm you?" The question hung in the air like a stone suspended by a thread. I nodded slowly. "Yes. He forced me out of the house. He grabbed me, shoved me. I have bruises. I have notes. I have screenshots." Kessler's eyes sharpened, his posture straightening. "Good. Document everything. That will be essential." My throat tightened. "I already have." He nodded again. "Your father trusted you with this. That is clear. Now tell me, does Logan know about this updated will?" I shook my head. "No. He found the letter my father gave me right before he died and tore it apart. He thought he destroyed the only copy." Kessler exhaled slowly. "Then we have an advantage, and you have protection." I blinked, unable to fully grasp that word. Protection. I had felt anything but protected for weeks. Kessler leaned forward, folding his hands. "If you want to proceed, the first step is filing for a probate freeze. That will temporarily lock all estate assets, including the house, until a judge reviews the situation. Logan will not be able to sell, transfer, or claim anything without the court's permission." The words washed over me like warm water over frozen skin. This was not revenge. This was order, structure, law. And for the first time, I felt the faintest flicker of safety. He continued, "I will file an emergency motion. With the letter from your father and the notarized will update, the judge will likely grant the freeze, especially if there is a history of violence." I lowered my voice. "There is. Logan has been telling people I am unstable, that I lied, that I left on my own." Kessler nodded. Abusers often do that. They rewrite the narrative before the victim has a chance to speak. But documentation undermines lies. Do you feel safe where you are staying? I hesitated. I am at a diner, sleeping in the utility room. It is temporary. His jaw tightened. That is not ideal. We can discuss options if things escalate. He tapped the letter gently. This is powerful, Emily. Your father wrote this with clarity and intention. He knew what he was doing, and he wanted you protected long after he was gone. Hearing that made my throat ache. My father had been preparing for a battle I did not even know was coming, and now he had handed me the tools to fight it. Kessler pushed a form toward me. Sign here. This starts the process. My hand trembled slightly as I picked up his pen. Not from fear this time, from something steadier. Purpose. I signed. The moment the pen left the paper, something in me shifted. A door opened. A boundary formed. A future took shape. Kessler sat back. I will file the motion within the hour. Expect pushback. Your brother will be furious. But the more he reacts, the more he reveals. And you have every right to stand your ground. I nodded. Thank you. Truly. As I stood to leave, he added one last thing, his voice firm but gentle. Emily, you are not alone in this. Your father made sure of that. And now the law will stand where he no longer can. The words followed me out of the office, clinging to the cold air as I stepped onto the sidewalk. For the first time since my father's funeral, I felt something that surprised me. Not fear, not grief, something steadier. The beginning of justice. For a few days after meeting with Mr. Kessler, the world felt strangely suspended. Not safe, not calm, but held in a kind of charged stillness like the seconds before a storm breaks. I worked my shifts quietly, fixed small appliances for customers who trusted me, and kept the binder of evidence tucked beneath my cot as if it were a shield made not of metal but of truth. I knew Logan would react eventually. Men like him always did. The moment they sensed a loss of control, they lunged for the nearest target. But even with that knowledge, even with the cold steadiness in my chest, I was not prepared for the way it happened. It was a Saturday evening, the diner buzzing with the weekend crowd. Families filled the booths. Teenagers laughed too loudly near the jukebox. An elderly couple split a slice of cherry pie at the counter. The scent of grilled onions drifted through the warm air. Everything felt ordinary, almost peaceful. Then the bell above the door shattered the moment. Logan stumbled inside. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw tight, and the heavy smell of alcohol clung to him like a second skin. The room shifted. Conversations dipped into uneasy silence. My breath caught, but I forced myself to keep wiping the counter. Mary, sensing trouble, instantly stepped toward the front, her expression firm. Sir, can I help you? Logan's gaze swept the diner until it landed on me. There you are. His voice slurred loud enough for everyone to hear. I felt the room's attention snap toward us. I tried to keep my tone calm. Logan, you need to leave. You cannot be here like this. He barked out a bitter laugh. Do not talk to me like you are better than me, like you did nothing wrong. Mary moved closer. Sir, you need to step outside. Logan ignored her completely. He strode forward, hitting a table with his hip and nearly knocking over a glass. A man in the booth pulled his daughter closer. People shifted uncomfortably. My pulse thrummed in my ears. Logan planted his hands on the counter, leaning toward me. His voice dropped to a venomous whisper, though everyone could still hear. You think you can steal from me and walk around like some hero? My mouth went dry. I stole nothing. I have not even been near the house since you threw me out. His eyes flared. Do not pretend you did not take Dad's things. That letter was mine. You tricked him, manipulated him. You were always his favorite. His words cracked something inside me, but before I could answer, he slammed his palm against the counter. Customers gasped. A woman grabbed her purse. Someone near the back quietly pulled out a phone. Across the room, the security camera blinked red. Logan's anger grew reckless. He spun toward the diners, raising his voice. She has been lying about everything. About me hitting her. About me kicking her out. She is trying to ruin my life. Embarrassment washed over me, sharp and burning. Not because of what he said, but because I knew how accusation worked. If someone says it loudly enough, confidently enough, people hesitate. They wonder. They question the victim before they question the aggressor. But then, as if fate itself intervened, Logan shouted the very words that sealed his undoing. She deserved those bruises, should have stayed quiet, should have taken the warning. The entire diner went still. Forks froze midair. A glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered on the floor. The little girl in the booth whispered something to her father, who stiffened with anger. I felt my heart drop a hollow echo in my chest. Logan's face blanched as though he realized too late what he had said. But the damage had already shaped itself into truth. A truth witnessed by a room full of strangers. A truth caught on multiple cell phones. A truth captured by the diner's security camera mounted just above the pie display. Mary stepped forward, her voice cold in a way I had never heard. "That is enough. You need to leave right now." Logan's fury sputtered into something weaker. He tried to regain control, waving his hands clumsily. "You do not understand. She is lying. She always lies." But no one looked confused anymore. They looked disgusted, protective, offended on my behalf. A man in work boots rose from his booth. "Time to go, buddy." Another stood beside him. "You have caused enough trouble." Logan's bravado collapsed. He stumbled back, muttering curses. Before he reached the door, the police arrived. 2 officers stepped inside, calm but authoritative. A customer must have called when he first started yelling. "Sir, step outside with us. Now." Logan pointed at me one last time, his voice cracking. "This is not over. She will not get away with this." I said nothing, not because I was afraid, but because silence at that moment held more power than anything I could have spoken. The officers guided him outside. They did not arrest him, they simply documented the incident, asked me questions, and collected statements from witnesses. Disorderly conduct, they called it. A disturbance report, standard, routine, but crucial, evidence. When the door finally shut behind the officers, the diner exhaled as one. Customers approached me quietly, offering support. "You did not deserve that. I am so sorry you had to go through that. If you need someone to testify, just ask." Mary placed a gentle hand on my back. "Come sit down, sweetheart. You are shaking." I had not realized it until she said the words, but my hands trembled violently. A delayed reaction to the adrenaline that had surged through me. I sank onto a stool. The world around me felt both too sharp and too blurred. But beneath the shock, beneath the exhaustion, something else stirred. Clarity. Logan had revealed himself. Publicly. On camera. With witnesses. He had admitted to hurting me in a room full of people. He had handed me the truth on a platter. I thought of my father's letter. Trust the law to stand where I no longer can. And for the first time since the night I lost him, I felt the unmistakable shift of momentum. The story was no longer his to twist. It was mine to tell. And now, I had proof. The morning after the diner incident, the air felt electric, as if the world itself understood that something irreversible had shifted. I woke before dawn, the utility room still and quiet, the faint buzz of the space heater blending with the lingering thrum of last night's adrenaline. My body felt heavy from exhaustion, but my mind was alert, sharp, anchored by a single truth. Logan had exposed himself, not in private, not behind closed doors, but in a room full of strangers who saw everything, who heard everything, and who would not forget. I dressed slowly, every movement careful, deliberate, and when I stepped into the cold morning air, it felt like stepping into a new phase of my life. One where the fear that had followed me for weeks no longer felt like the only voice I owned. Mr. Kessler had told me to come in as soon as possible if anything else happened. Last night was more than anything. It was a turning point. The brisk wind bit at my cheeks as I walked to his office, the sky barely beginning to lighten. When I arrived, the receptionist looked up, surprised to see me so early, but her expression softened when she noticed the tension in my shoulders. "He is expecting you. You are not the first person to come in right when something breaks open." She led me to his office. Kessler rose as soon as I stepped inside. "Emily, sit. Tell me what happened." I handed him the written report from the officers, along with the witnesses' names and the screenshots I had saved from customers who had already texted me their videos. People had reached out late into the night. They had seen what happened and wanted me to know they stood with me. Ordinary people. People who had no reason to lie. Kessler studied everything carefully, his expression shifting from concern to satisfaction, a measured kind of approval that made me exhale for the first time since yesterday. This is exactly what we needed. He tapped the papers. Between the will update the conditions your father set your documented history of harm and now a public disturbance where Logan admitted to causing you injuries, the judge will most likely grant the freeze today. Something fluttered in my chest. Relief, disbelief, and something like justice beginning to draw its first breath. Kessler motioned for me to follow him into the adjacent room where he had already prepared the emergency motion. It felt surreal to see my name printed on legal documents pages that carried the weight of my father's last wishes. We will present everything. His voice was steady. The handwritten letter, the notarized update your evidence, the police report, and the witness statements. This is one of the cleanest probate freeze cases I have seen in years. He paused. I know this is painful, but it is also powerful. Your father protected you. Now the law will enforce that protection. The next hour moved in a blur. Filing documents, signing forms, reviewing statements, preparing for the hearing. By noon, we were standing outside the courthouse, a red brick building with wide stone steps and tall windows that reflected the pale winter sky. My breath felt shallow as we entered, my palms sweating despite the cold. Kessler rested a hand on my shoulder. You are not the one on trial. Remember that. We sat in the gallery of a small courtroom. A judge with silver hair and tired eyes reviewed the documents quietly. Logan was not present. He had not been notified yet. This was standard for emergency motions. Less chance for interference. Less chance for intimidation. After several minutes, the judge looked up. Ms. Warren, do you understand what a probate freeze entails? I nodded, though my voice felt thin when I answered. Yes, Your Honor. It means the estate cannot be accessed or altered until the court completes its review. The judge nodded, satisfied. And the evidence presented suggests your brother has violated the behavioral conditions set forth in this notarized will update. There was something in her tone. Recognition. Sympathy. A silent acknowledgement of what it means to be harmed by someone who should have protected you. She reviewed the police report again, reading the part where Logan shouted his admission in the diner. Then she set the papers down. Based on the documentation and the legal terms outlined by your father, I am granting the temporary probate freeze effective immediately. You will receive written confirmation within the hour. The room tilted, not in fear, but in overwhelming clarity. This was the moment everything changed. This was the moment the law placed itself firmly between me and the man who had tried to destroy me. Kessler nodded respectfully. Thank you, Your Honor. When we stepped outside the courthouse, I felt the cold air hit my face like a cleansing shock. My knees felt weak, and for a moment I simply stood there letting the truth settle. It was real. It was done. Logan no longer had access to the house. He could not sell it, mortgage it, or claim its assets, not without facing consequences, and he still did not know. That afternoon, after I returned to the diner for my shift, the news reached him. I knew the moment it happened because my phone buzzed with a barrage of messages, at first incoherent with rage, then sharper, more frantic. You ruined everything. You think you can take what is mine. I will not let you do this. You are nothing. Nothing. You are dead to me. My hands trembled as I read them, but not from fear, from confirmation. The freeze had struck exactly where it hurt him most, his control. Mary walked past, saw my face, and placed a cup of tea in front of me. The kind look in her eyes told me she did not need to know the details to understand the weight of the moment. That evening, as I wiped down the counter after closing the door, rattled violently. I froze. But it was not Logan. It was an officer. He stepped inside and handed me the official probate freeze order. Logan was notified earlier today. He did not take it well. We will have extra patrols in the area for the next few days. My breath loosened slightly. Thank you. He nodded and left. I stood alone in the quiet diner, the laminated counter cool beneath my hands. The storm had truly begun now, but for the first time I had shelter. I had truth. I had law. And as I stared at the papers in my hands, I understood something my father had always tried to teach me. Justice does not arrive all at once. It builds, slowly, quietly, piece by piece. And today it had taken its first public step. The fallout did not arrive like a single blow. It arrived in waves, each one pulling more of Logan's carefully constructed world out from under him, each one proving that consequences were not abstract ideas, but real forces that moved silently until they struck with precision. 2 days after the probate freeze, I walked past our old neighborhood on my way back from repairing a broken lamp for one of Mary's friends. I had taken the long route on purpose, unsure why. Maybe part of me needed proof that the world I once knew no longer owned me. The house stood at the end of the cul-de-sac, quiet, still the yard untrimmed, and the porch lights burned out, even though the afternoon sun had not yet faded. A strip of bright orange paper was taped to the front door. From where I stood, I could already see the bold black print. Notice of legal hold pending probate review. It was official. The house was frozen. No one could enter, alter, sell, or claim anything inside until the court allowed it. Logan must have seen it that morning. I imagined his reaction. The slammed fists, the roaring outrage, the disbelief twisting into panic as he realized he could not touch anything without violating a court order. For years, he had acted as if everything in that house belonged to him by birthright. Now a piece of paper told the truth. It never did. My phone buzzed again as I walked away. Another voicemail. His voice cracked through the speaker, raw, unhinged. "You did this! You stupid little snake! They are treating me like a criminal because of you. Call me back. Fix this before it goes too far." I deleted it, not out of cruelty, but out of a newfound understanding. His panic was not my responsibility. Later that evening, when I returned to the diner, Mary stood with her arms crossed, a tight expression on her face. "You should prepare yourself," she warned gently. "People are talking." She pulled up a local community forum on her phone. Someone had posted the video from the diner incident, and hundreds of comments had appeared within hours. Some asked if I was all right. Some condemned Logan outright, but the ones that struck deepest were from people who had known him for years. I always knew something was off about him. He was rude to our kids once. He threatened a neighbor during an argument about property lines. I thought he had a temper, but this is worse than I realized. For the first time in my life, the world saw what I had seen alone for years. Logan's mask was slipping in public, and social reputation was a currency he never expected to lose. The next blow landed 3 days later. I was on break behind the diner when Mary stepped outside holding her phone. She hesitated before speaking. "It is about Logan. He got fired. The company finally reviewed the police report and the circulating video. They cited workplace conduct clauses and let him go." For a moment, I just stared. My breath caught somewhere between sorrow and something colder. It was not joy, exactly. It was the release of tension that had been knotted in my spine since the night he threw me out. Mary placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. Losing a job is a serious thing. Even if he deserves consequences, it can still feel heavy. She was right. It did feel heavy. Like watching a bridge collapse that had never been safe to stand on but had still been part of the landscape of your life. That afternoon, I received a text from a former neighbor. "You should know he was screaming in the street today. Said you ruined his life. Police came and told him to calm down or they would arrest him." I read the message twice, the words settling slowly. Logan, who had always strutted with the confidence of someone certain the world owed him obedience, was unraveling. The man who had shoved me out of the house, who believed he held all the power, was being held accountable in ways he never imagined. The next consequence came that night around 9. I was wiping down the stainless steel counter when the door chimed and a woman stepped inside. She was from Child Services, though I did not understand why she was there until she explained. There had been a complaint filed anonymously regarding domestic violence in the home where I used to live. They had attempted contact with Logan, but he was uncooperative. She wanted to confirm I was safe and no longer residing with him. The irony was sharp. For months, I had needed help and no one had seen the signs. Now, when he was falling apart publicly, the system finally took notice. I answered every question calmly. Yes, I was safe. Yes, I lived here temporarily. No, I had not been in contact with him beyond receiving harassing messages. She thanked me and left her concern genuine. After she walked out, I sat at one of the corner booths and let myself breathe. Logan's world was collapsing because of his own choices, not mine. The court freeze the job loss, the community backlash, the police warnings. Each one flowed naturally from his behavior. The more the truth surfaced, the less power he had left to hide behind excuses. Within a week, neighbors reported seeing movers remove Logan's belongings from the front lawn where he had thrown them in a rage, ignoring the legal hold. Officers intervened and made him stop. Word spread quickly. In small towns, nothing stays quiet for long. Kessler called me again 2 days later. His tone was matter-of-fact, but firm. "We have more evidence now. Your brother left another voicemail, threatening tone. We will submit it into the case file." He paused. "Emily, everything he is doing is reinforcing the court's view of him. None of this hurts your position. It only strengthens it." I nodded, though he could not see me. I felt the truth in his words. Every eruption from Logan was like another brick stacked on the wall between us. That night, after closing, as I swept the diner floor, a deep quiet settled inside me, a quiet I had not felt since before my father died. This was not revenge. It was accountability. And accountability leaves a different taste. Colder, cleaner, more honest. Standing alone in the empty diner, I whispered to myself, "He is losing everything he thought made him powerful, and I am losing the version of myself who felt powerless under him." It was not triumph, not cruelty, just truth. And the truth was finally louder than Logan. 8 years is enough time for a life to rebuild itself layer by layer the way a tree grows new rings after a forest fire. Sometimes I forget the girl I once was, the one who slept in a utility room with bruises she did not talk about and a future she was too afraid to imagine. Other times, the memory of her feels close enough to touch. I was 26 when I realized that the life around me no longer resembled the one Logan had tried to trap me in. The small repair shop I opened 2 years earlier sat on a quiet corner near the library with large windows that let in warm afternoon light and a bell on the door that chimed every time a customer walked in. My father's old toolbox sat behind the counter, dented and worn, the same one he used when teaching me how to take apart a broken outlet or how to trace a circuit. The parts he taught me became the foundation for everything I had built. What started as side work fixing lamps or appliances for Mary's friends turned into a business that supported me comfortably. Local landlords brought me broken heaters. Elderly neighbors trusted me with anything electrical. A nearby hardware store offered me discounted supplies because I had sent so many customers their way. And on good days when the sun was steady and my mind was quiet, I felt something close to peace. Logan existed in my life now only as an occasional ripple, a distant echo. Yet fate has a way of reminding us that the past never stays buried forever. On a cold Tuesday morning, while I was installing a new light fixture in the shop, my phone buzzed. The screen showed 27 missed calls, all from the same number. I froze. It was the number Logan used to have long ago before he changed phones repeatedly to avoid creditors. My stomach tightened as I stared at the call log. Even after all these years, the sight of his name sent a tremor through me. I let the phone ring again without answering. Minutes later, a text arrived. "Emily, please, I need help. I have no one." The words looked wrong, as if they belonged to a stranger. The last time Logan had spoken to me, he had been full of rage, blaming me for every consequence of his own making, but the tone now was different, hollow, tired, close to breaking. I did not reply, not immediately. Instead, I closed the shop early and walked through the park across the street. The air smelled of pine and frost. Children played near the swings, their laughter drifting across the lawn, a sharp contrast to the weight inside my chest. A part of me wanted to delete the message, erase the connection forever. Another part whispered a quieter truth. There is power in choosing your response instead of being controlled by fear. Later that evening, curiosity pulled me to search his name online. The results appeared instantly. A foreclosure notice from 6 years earlier. A short article about a workplace altercation leading to termination, a county record listing unpaid debts, a mugshot from a disorderly conduct arrest 2 years ago. A public post from someone in my old neighborhood said they occasionally saw him wandering near the bus station thin or older, carrying everything he owned in a torn backpack. I stared at the screen, a knot tightening in my throat. Consequences do not disappear just because time passes. They collect, they compound, they shape a life quietly until one day the person looks around and realizes there is nothing left standing. I wondered if Logan had reached that point. Days passed, then a week. The messages slowed but did not stop. He tried again on a Thursday afternoon. "Emily, please answer. I am not asking for money. I just need to talk." That last line held something fragile, something unfamiliar. Humility. I read it 3 times before setting the phone down without replying. The shop door chimed and Mr. Harris stepped inside. His hair was whiter than I remembered, but his stride was steady, his eyes warm. He had been one of the first customers to encourage me 8 years earlier. "You look tired, kid," he said, though I was no longer a kid and he knew it. "Everything all right?" I forced a smile. "Just thinking too much." He nodded as if he understood every thought in my head, even without hearing it. "Thinking is good. Letting the past decide for you is not." I stood there silently for a moment, letting his words settle. That evening, as I locked up, the streetlights glowed softly against the pavement. For the first time, the question formed clearly in my mind. If Logan truly had no one, what did that mean for me? Did compassion require forgiveness? Or was helping him a way of breaking the last invisible thread, tying me to the pain he caused? 8 years had made me stronger, steadier, clearer. I no longer needed his approval, nor feared his temper. He had no power over my life now. Maybe that was the only reason I could even consider answering him. The next morning, while sorting invoices, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I picked up my phone and listened to the newest voicemail. His voice was thin. "Emily, it is me. I do not know where else to go. I know you hate me. I know I deserve it. I need help. Please." I closed my eyes, not out of fear, but out of memory. The bruises. The cold steps outside our house. The night he threw me out after our father's funeral. None of that could be undone. But I was no longer that girl, and he was no longer the man who stood over me, certain he would never face consequences. Years had rewritten us both, though in very different ways. I whispered to myself, "You do not owe him your life, but you do owe yourself your peace." When I opened my eyes, the decision was clear. I would meet him, not to heal the past, not to fix him, but to face what remained without letting fear speak for me. I texted him a time and place, a neutral location, a cafe near the bus stop, public, safe. After 8 years, it was time to see what was left of the man who once believed he could break me. The cafe sat on the corner of a busy intersection near the bus station, its windows fogged from the mix of winter air and the warmth inside. I chose it on purpose. Public enough to feel safe, quiet enough to hear every word, familiar enough that it did not carry the weight of our shared past. When I arrived, the morning rush had thinned, leaving behind the soft clatter of mugs and muted conversations. I ordered a tea I barely tasted and took a seat at a table near the window, my hands wrapped around the warm cup as if it were an anchor. I checked my phone. No new messages. For a moment, I wondered if he would show at all. Maybe the voicemail had been a moment of desperation he regretted. Maybe he would vanish again as he had so many times before. But then, the door opened, a gust of cold air sweeping in behind a figure I almost did not recognize. Logan stepped inside, slowly scanning the room with the hesitant caution of someone who no longer expected to be welcomed anywhere. His hair was longer than I remembered, streaked with gray at the temples. His shoulders, once held in rigid confidence, slumped slightly under the weight of exhaustion. His clothes were clean but worn too thin for the weather. His eyes searched the cafe until they found me. He froze. For a heartbeat, we simply stared at each other, two people shaped by the same childhood, but carved in opposite directions. He approached the table with small, careful steps as if afraid the floor might fall apart beneath him. When he finally sat across from me, he said nothing at first. His hands shook slightly as he folded them together on the table. I did not speak either. Silence for once felt like the right beginning. After nearly a full minute, he inhaled slowly. "You look different," he said quietly. "Stronger." His voice held none of its old sharpness. I nodded. 8 years will do that. He looked down, his jaw tightening with something like shame. "I am not going to pretend I deserve to be here. You probably hate me." I studied his face. The man in front of me was not the same 24-year-old who had thrown me out of our house without hesitation. Time had chipped away at him, or maybe consequences had. "I do not hate you," I said softly, "but I do not trust you." He winced, but he did not deny it. "I guess I earned that." The waitress approached and asked if he wanted anything. He shook his head. She gave him a sympathetic glance before leaving, and I realized how hollow he must look to a stranger. He cleared his throat. "I do not know how to start. There is a lot to say, and none of it feels big enough." I waited. He took another breath. "After the house was frozen, I fell apart. I know you know that. And maybe you think it happened because of what you did." He paused, then shook his head. "But it happened because of who I was." I did not respond. He continued. "I was angry at Dad for dying, angry at myself for ruining everything. And the only person I could take it out on was you." His voice faltered. "I was jealous. You were always better with him. He trusted you more. He told you things. He saw you in ways I could not understand." I swallowed. "Dad loved us both. You just never let yourself believe it." He gave a bitter laugh. "Maybe. Or maybe I was too wrapped up in proving that I was the one who deserved everything. The house, the money, his approval, all of it." He rubbed his hands over his face. "When I lost the house, people started talking. When I lost my job, they talked more. And when that video from the diner spread, everyone saw what I had been for years. Someone out of control. Someone dangerous. Someone I did not even recognize anymore." The ache in his voice surprised me. Not because it made me pity him, but because it was real. I remembered him standing in the diner shouting, raging, unaware that the world around him was watching in full clarity. Consequences had followed him like shadows he could no longer outrun. He looked up at me, then his eyes tired. "I know I cannot undo what happened. I know saying sorry does not erase it. But I am sorry. Not in the way I used to throw that word around without meaning it. I mean it now." I sat very still. 8 years ago, I had dreamt of hearing those words, clung to the fantasy that an apology could stitch back together everything he had broken. Now I understood something different. Apology was not repair. It was only acknowledgement, and acknowledgement did not obligate forgiveness. I nodded slowly. "I hear you." Logan blinked hard, like he had expected anger instead. After a moment, he exhaled. "I am not asking you to fix my life. I know that is not your job. I do not want to be this version of myself anymore. I need help getting into a program, addiction counseling, anger management, something. I do not have insurance. I do not have anything." I studied him in silence. The Logan I once knew would never have admitted weakness, would never have asked for help, would never have faced me like this, stripped of pride, stripped of bluster, stripped of anything except honesty. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I said quietly, "I can help you find resources. But I am not your home. I am not your rescue. I will not be pulled back into the chaos you created." His shoulders sagged with relief rather than disappointment. "That is more than I deserve." I nodded. "Probably. But it is what I can offer." We sat there for several minutes, letting the weight of our past settle between us. Not as something to fix, just something to acknowledge. When Logan finally stood, he hesitated. "You turned out stronger than I ever imagined." I managed a small, tired smile. I had to. When he walked out, the bell above the door chimed softly. I watched him step into the cold morning light, his figure shrinking as he moved down the sidewalk. The past had not vanished. The scars were still part of me, but I felt lighter than I had in years. I had faced him, and I had not broken. The morning after meeting Logan, I woke with a strange heaviness in my chest, the kind that comes not from fear, but from decisions that linger long after they are made. The light coming through my apartment window felt softer than usual, muted by a thin layer of frost on the glass. I sat at the edge of the bed, letting the stillness settle around me while the memory of Logan's tired face replayed in my mind. The hollow eyes, the trembling hands, the vulnerability I had never seen before. He had not asked for forgiveness. He had not asked for money. He had asked for a chance to stop being the man who once threw me into a wall and left me outside our home without hesitation. That request alone carried a weight I could not ignore, but it did not erase the boundaries I had shaped carefully over 8 years of rebuilding myself. I made coffee, its warmth grounding me, and opened my laptop to search for programs he might qualify for. There were county-funded addiction centers, transitional housing options, anger management courses, and nonprofit mental health resources. Some had waiting lists, some required referrals, some were open to walk-ins. As I compiled the list, I realized I felt neither satisfaction nor resentment, just clarity. I sent him a simple text. Here are some programs that can help. I can call and confirm availability if you need. No promises beyond this. Minutes passed before he responded. Thank you. I know this is more than I deserve. I stared at the message for a long moment. The words did not undo anything he had done, but they showed he understood the limits now, something he had never understood before. I replied with only a short acknowledgement before placing my phone face down on the table. I refused to let myself spiral into emotional territory that belonged to an older version of me, the girl who once would have rushed to save him. I had outgrown that girl. That afternoon, I visited Mary at the diner. The place hummed with its usual rhythm, the scent of coffee and grilled onions drifting through the air. She looked up from her ledger when I stepped inside. You all right, sweetheart? You look like your mind is running laps. I leaned against the counter. I met with Logan. Her expression softened, then tightened with concern. And are you safe? I am. It was calm. He was different. Or maybe he was just broken enough to finally see what he did. Mary nodded slowly. People change, but consequences change them faster. Just make sure you are not carrying any weight that belongs to him. I assured her I was not, and for once the words felt true. Later that evening, I called one of the programs on Logan's behalf. They had an open intake appointment the next morning, but warned he would need identification and proof of residency from the shelter he currently stayed at. I texted him the details. He replied almost instantly, I will be there. Thank you, Emily. I hesitated before responding with a final reminder. This is your work, not mine. I am pointing you toward the door. You walk through it alone. He agreed without argument. The next day, I received a message from the program staff confirming he had arrived for orientation. He had looked worn out, but sober, cooperative, determined. I allowed myself a single, deep breath of relief, not because I wanted him to succeed for my sake, but because humanity is easier to carry than bitterness. Still, I refused to let his progress pull me into his world again. I kept my boundaries sharp. I did not meet him. I did not call him. I did not reply to every message. I did not offer comfort. I did not let him confuse assistance with reconciliation. Instead, I continued focusing on my life. The repair shop's business was growing steadily. More landlords called needing electrical work. A local newspaper wrote a small feature about my business, highlighting how women in trade fields were reshaping small towns. Customers began arriving with clippings tucked under their arms, proud to tell me they recognized me from the article. Harris stopped by and dropped off muffins his daughter had baked. He gestured at the framed article on the wall and grinned. Knew you had it in you from the start, kid. I smiled, letting the warmth of that simple praise settle somewhere deep inside me. One evening, as I locked the shop, my phone buzzed again. It was a voicemail from Logan. I almost ignored it. Almost. When I pressed play, his voice emerged quiet and tentative. I just wanted to tell you I went to the second session today. They said if I keep showing up, I might qualify for a longer program. I know you do not want updates. I get it. I wanted you to know I am trying. Not for you, for me. The message ended abruptly, and I stood alone on the sidewalk feeling neither joy nor sorrow, but something steadier. Closure is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is just a quiet shift inside your chest where anger used to live. I listened once more before deleting it. Not out of cruelty, but out of intention. I was not his support system. I was not his redeemer. I was simply someone choosing not to let old wounds decide who I became. Over the next few months, I helped him only in ways that did not cross my boundaries. When he needed information about transportation vouchers, I sent resources. When he needed a referral letter for a job training program, I wrote a factual statement confirming his participation in counseling. I never gave money. I never invited him into my world. I never blurred the lines. Compassion is not reconciliation. Assistance is not absolution. Healing is not the same as returning to the person who hurt you. The more I honored those truths, the more I felt myself grow into the life I had built with my own hands. One evening, as I stood in my workshop adjusting a light fixture, I whispered the words that had become my quiet mantra. I can help without surrendering myself, and for the first time since childhood, that felt like freedom. The first warm day of early spring arrived without warning, spilling sunlight across the workshop floor in a way that made everything look softer, brighter, cleaner. I stood at my counter that morning sipping coffee and reviewing invoices when a familiar envelope fell out from between two folders. The paper was slightly worn edges softened from years of being handled with reverence. It was the notarized letter from my father, the one Logan never knew existed until the court forced him to face it. For a long moment, I just held it, feeling the weight of my father's handwriting as if he were standing beside me again. Even after everything, his voice still steadied me in ways nothing else could. I opened the letter slowly, letting my eyes trace the familiar lines. Truth will defend you longer than anger ever will. He had written that near the bottom. At 18, I did not fully understand those words. At 26, after years of rebuilding a life he hoped I would one day have the meaning felt carved into my bones. I set the letter down and looked around the shop. Tools arranged neatly on the wall. Shelves full of repaired appliances waiting for pickup. Notes from customers thanking me for my work. Evidence of a life built not from revenge, but from resilience. The bell on the door chimed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Mary stopping by before her shift. She carried a bag of muffins and a smile that had become one of the quiet constants of my adult life. "Morning, sweetheart," she said, placing the bag on the counter. "How are you holding up?" I hesitated, then I told her the truth. "I think I am finally done being afraid of who I used to be." She studied me with that perceptive calm only she possessed. "That is what healing looks like, Emily. Not forgetting, but no longer being ruled by the memory." After she left, I locked the shop for my lunch break and walked to the park across the street. Children chased each other near the playground. A couple read on a bench. A man walked his dog along a gravel path. Ordinary scenes, yet they felt symbolic somehow. A reminder that life goes on whether we cling to pain or choose to release it. I sat beneath a tree, the grass cool beneath my palms, and exhaled slowly. 8 years ago, I would have walked through this park, hunched, hyper-aware, bracing for danger that came not from the world, but from my own home. Now the world around me felt open, safe, mine. My phone buzzed. For a moment, my pulse tightened, expecting another message from Logan. But it was a brief notification, a case closure update from the probate court. I opened the email. After years of complications, appeals, and delays, the estate had been fully settled. The house was legally transferred to me. The assets, though smaller now after debts and legal fees were released, the matter was closed. The justice my father intended had finally arrived in full. Yet, as I read the email, something unexpected stirred inside me. Not triumph, not vindication. Peace, quiet, steady, uncomplicated peace. The girl who was thrown out on the night of her father's funeral had never imagined she would reach a day where justice did not feel like fire, but like calm water smoothing out jagged stone. That evening, I visited the house for the first time since the freeze. The key felt strange in my hand. The yard was overgrown, the gutters sagging, the shutters peeling. Years of neglect visible in every corner. I walked onto the porch, my steps echoing softly. When I opened the door, the scent of dust and stale air hit me. The living room felt smaller than I remembered, as if time had shrunk the walls. I walked through each room, slowly touching nothing. Just seeing, just remembering. My father's chair. The banister where my back struck the night Logan shoved me. The hallway where I used to leave my shoes in a neat row because Dad liked the house tidy. The kitchen where we cooked on weekends. The shadows of our life together lingered in every corner. In the empty quiet of that house, I felt my father's presence settle around me like a warm, steady breath. I whispered to him, "I made it, Dad. Not the way we planned. But I made it." I did not stay long. The house belonged to me now, but it no longer felt like home. Home was the life I had built on my own terms. As I locked the door behind me, I realized something important. Justice is not about reclaiming what was taken. It is about reclaiming who you become afterward. A few days later, I received one final message from Logan. It was short. "I finished the program. I have a place to stay. Thank you for helping without letting me drag you down. I do not know if I will ever earn forgiveness, but I want to earn a life I am not ashamed of." I stared at the message for a long time before replying with the only truth I could offer. "I hope you do. Take care of yourself." Then I archived the thread, not to erase it, but to place it where it belonged, behind me. Late that night, I stood outside my apartment, the soft glow of the porch light casting a gentle circle around my feet. I thought about everything that had led me here. The bruises, the cold steps outside the house, the silent nights in a utility room, the weight of fear, the strength of survival, the unexpected kindnesses that stitched me back together. The slow, steady building of a life not shaped by pain, but by purpose. And finally, the boundaries that allowed me to help without being consumed. I whispered the truth into the quiet air around me. I made him regret it not by hurting him, but by becoming someone he could never break again. I stepped inside, closed the door gently behind me, and let the last pieces of the past settle wherever old stories go when they no longer control the present. Then I asked the question that had come to define my journey and might now belong to whoever listens to my story. If the person who once threw you out into the dark returned years later with empty hands and desperate eyes, would you open the door even a little or leave them standing in the cold they once forced you into? If you stayed with me through this entire story, I want to ask you something that goes deeper than entertainment and closer to the truth we all carry. At some point in our lives, many of us are forced to walk through a door we never chose, pushed there by the people who were supposed to protect us. Maybe it was a parent who used control as love. Maybe it was a sibling who mistook power for entitlement. Maybe it was a spouse, a friend, a community. But if you have ever stood in the cold because someone you trusted put you there, then you already understand Emily's journey in ways words can barely touch. So here is my question for you. The one that lingers long after the story ends. When the person who broke you comes back years later with empty hands, softened pride, and a voice that finally trembles with truth, what does justice look like to you? Is it turning away without hesitation because the wound still aches even after time tried to seal it? Is it allowing them a fraction of grace without letting them touch the parts of you they once damaged? Is it forgiveness on your terms? Or is it simply peace? The kind that does not require reconciliation, the kind you build when you remember you are no longer the person they hurt. I want to hear from you, not because there is a right answer, but because every answer tells a story of its own, a story of survival, a story of boundaries learned the hard way, a story of dignity reclaimed. Tell me where you are watching from. Tell me what time it is for you right now. Tell me whether you believe people change, or whether some consequences are meant to settle where they fall. Tell me if you would open the door a little, or if you would keep it closed for the sake of the version of yourself who once stood outside begging for a kindness that never came. And if you or someone you love has ever rebuilt a life after being dismissed, controlled, or pushed aside by the very people who should have lifted you up, share whatever you are comfortable sharing. You never know who will read your words and feel less alone. If this story resonated with you, if it echoed a memory you have tried to put into words, or if it reminded you of someone who deserved better than what they received, consider subscribing to the channel. These stories are fictional, but the emotions behind them are lived by millions. Together, we explore courage boundaries, justice, and the quiet strength of choosing yourself even when it costs everything. Thank you for watching, and now it is your turn to answer the question. When the past knocks again, do you open the door or do you leave it outside where it can no longer hurt you?